last week, we did a quick update on Hugh Jackman and Deborra Lee Furness's divorce. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Because it just been announced that they were finally divorced, that it was done.
And she released that statement to Daily Mail, and when we recorded, it seemed so
Out of character.
Yeah, and we actually didn't know if it was real or not, so we were sort of a bit, we're not quite sure. Surely she didn't say this because it was quite raw.
She did say that. So just a quick recap on what she said was, my heart and compassion goes out to anyone who has traversed the traumatic journey of betrayal. It is a profound wound that cuts deep. So Deborra Lee Furness definitely did say that. It's the first time she's come out since their split, which is over a year ago, nearly 2 years ago, I think, and confirmed what lots of people had been talking about, which is that she at least feels very betrayed by what happened, and he's now repartnered. And then Jessie shared something in our group chat that was Hugh's response that went completely over my head. Please explain, Jessie Stevens.
So I was just minding my own business on Friday doing a little scroll, and I see Hugh Jackman doing a lovely little dance on Instagram.
It was like with a skipping rope.
I love Hugh Jackman doing a little dance. So I turned it on and watched, and he was dancing to Bye 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 by NSYNC, which was all about farewelling a partner. And then I looked at the caption, not in a nice way. I looked at the caption, which was just in capitals, the word finally. And I put it in our group chat and I said, guys, have we seen this? And Holly was like, he's so good at skipping. And I was like,
because
Holly,
that's a little clip from his one-man show that he's not doing anymore, but that he didn't release at the time, right?
I thought it was a flex of like, look how fit I am, because skipping's really hard. I've tried it in gym class.
Wasn't about skipping, Holly Wainwright.
I'm sorry.
It was shade.
It was about saying finally bye-bye to my ex-wife, right? Ooh. So the reaction since has been mixed. And the reason we want to talk about it again
How did you feel about that when you
realised
realised that's what it was?
I was like, petty, Hugh, very petty. I think sometimes if you're the one who's been called out, well, I guess you make a decision, but it would have been classier to shut up, right? It would have been classier. But then that's what this conversation's about, right? Because that's how some people feel about what Deborra Lee said. Some people are like, oh, much classier to keep your mouth shut. And then I read this article by Kate Halfpenny in the 9 Papers on the weekend that argued in defense of women not having to play nice all the time when they're on the end of a particularly nasty betrayal. She wrote, without taking sides on the ethics of a marriage I basically know nothing about, here's why I am applauding what Furness's move stands for. Back to the honesty first. She reminded us you don't have to keep smiling when someone blows up your life. You don't owe anyone a soft landing for decisions they made or have to perform gratitude for the privilege of being abandoned. She reminded us you don't need to prioritize everyone else's comfort over what you're busting to say, even if sometimes admitting life sucks feels risky. What do we think about that? Do we think that a woman scorned, which is, the cliche, has kind of been given a bit of permission by what Deborra Lee said?
I liked her point that you don't have to keep smiling when someone blows up your life. And you are allowed to leave your wife for someone else. That is not against the law, right? But that person that you left gets to have a feeling about it and gets to express that if they want. And I think what I felt about the Hugh Jackman response, which perhaps it was just a very poorly timed ode to NSYNC.
Finally what?
Well, finally he's done of it. Finally the divorce.
No, but yes, there's no good intentioned interpretation of that.
And that's the thing, is you can make that decision, but then you don't get to be shady about it. I reckon that Deborra Lee or whatever then gets to have the last word, and then we let it lie. It was that there was something so...
We don't know what happened in their marriage.
We don't know what happened.
Or how it's been since then,
in terms
he
of
decided to leave.
Anger, I think Deborra Lee Furness owned it and she said what she meant. I think what was difficult about the Hugh Jackman thing is that it was slightly obscure, which felt less honest.
I think it felt like Deborra Lee was punching up and it felt like Hugh Jackman was punching down in that instance. Of course, the most famous betrayal in public, that would be an analogue comparison would be when Jennifer Aniston was left by Brad Pitt for Angelina Jolie, who was a co-star in his movie Mr. and Mrs. Smith.
The subject of my thesis.
Yes. And so just about a month or so after they had announced their split and the world had learned through paparazzi photos that Brad and Angelina were in fact a couple. They posed for, as part of the publicity for Mr. and Mrs. Smith, they posed for the cover of W magazine, and it was like this sort of set as if they were this couple, and there were like 6 babies, and it was like them on the, remember that magazine etched in my brain? Like this, one of the photos was them with 6 babies, as if it was fairly prescient, but as if it was that was their family, and they were played a couple in this photo shoot. And in her first interview in Vanity Fair, Jennifer Aniston was asked about it, and the whole world was waiting to see how she would handle this most public betrayal. And I remember exactly what she said. Of him, she said, I feel like he is missing a sensitivity chip.
Yeah.
And then she also said about Angelina Jolie, something about it being not cool.
Uncool
and that was
the
uncool.
word, yeah.
And that was as much as she said.
Yeah.
Ever.
So I read this story over the weekend about anger, women's anger, and it was written, or it was an interview with a woman named Dr. Jennifer Cox, who's written this book about female anger. And she says that it presents differently in different women. For some, it's like a slow bubbling sensation, and for others, it is like a hot iron. And it hits them really, really fast, right? And then she said that there are 5 different anger personalities that women have. The first is the internalizer, so you keep it inside and you think that expressing it would be really impolite. And the impacts of that on your physical health have been proven. So
I feel
things
like that's you.
I think it is too. And so you just kind of suppress. Then you've got the reactor. She has been labelled a Karen. You snap. So you react in the moment, which isn't ideal either.
That sounds like me.
The denier, and that means, and maybe I relate most with this, the denier, you don't even know you're angry. So you label it something else. You label it sad. You label it worried. The displacer, I think a lot of women will relate with this. You absorb the anger from your boss being a dickhead to you, and then you go home and take it out on your husband. You displace the anger in your life. And the last one is the embracer, and that's what we should all be aiming for. And to be an embracer is to sometimes like decide whether or not you're going to express it, but acknowledge that anger is a thing that actually isn't a negative emotion. It is the reason why you get a rise in adrenaline and cortisol is because your body is saying there is something in this situation that needs to change. So it's giving you the energy to go to say something.
Propulsive.
Yeah, exactly right. It's actually a really positive thing. And so I thought with Deborra Lee that you decide whether you're going to do something with the anger or whether you're going to sit with it. And sometimes it's better for you to do something with it.
Yeah, but Deborra Lee isn't just us, right? As in that she knew that statement was going to make headlines around the world and was going to change forever the way everybody looks at Hugh Jackman and his new relationship. So it was a very specific grenade to throw. And I'm not saying whether or not she should have done it, but it's, you know, one of the things that Kate Halfpenny says in that is she said it was very strategic to wait this long. And so in a way that was really smart because, you know, revenge is a dish best served cold, all of that. She's kept
and also
it zipped
no
for
doubt
2 years.
they were negotiating and there would have been non-disparagement clauses.
Well, it felt considered.
And then throw the grenade. But it was a very emotional statement. It's interesting because, you know, every expert on divorce ever will say if there are children involved, it's absolutely critical to never criticize the other person. But also, what is it like? Well, I know what it's like, but it's for people who are always around everybody pretending everything's fine when it's really not fine.
Particularly for women.
Particularly for that sort of buttoned up lip, I'm not going to criticize him even though he's doing X, Y, Z. Is that always the best policy? I don't think it is, you know.
It's certainly cut through in this age of celebrity split announcements that are like, we've never loved each other more. We are best friends.
We just love each other too much. There's too much love for marriage.
So much love. We just need to split.
But to be honest, that's where they started, right? Like when they first announced their split, it was like that. And it's like finally now the
I think
truth
that's before
can
she
come
knew,
out.
perhaps.
And also before, while it was all still playing nice. Often in splits, it takes a long time for everything to settle out. And then you're like, right.
Yeah.